Warning, the podcast you're about to listen to may contain graphic descriptions of violent assaults, murder, and adult language. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome to the Murder Police Podcast, The Murder of Umi Southworth, Part 2.
After the interview had finished, it was probably an hour and 15 minutes. But what had made it stop, or why the interview stopped at that point, was because I had received a phone call.
Yeah, I was going to say that was a pretty big event in this case.
Tell us about the phone call.
It was a call you never want to get. Definitely, as we talked about, this case changed policy. The coroner, this is about 3 hours after Umi had been located, and they went to start processing the area around the mattress and realized that, in fact, Umi was still alive.
Yeah, what had happened was the coroner had actually described that when they lifted the box spring to examine the scene further for forensics, that he actually had heard her take a gasp of air or breath, and at that point, they checked her for a pulse, and she had a very low pulse. So at that point, they called EC to come in. They removed her, and they transported to the hospital. And there she was placed on a ventilator. And we'll talk more about that later, but she ends up passing away the following day.
So at this point, husband doesn't know she's been found still, even 3 hours later.
That's correct.
And doesn't know that she's still alive.
So then do you all just send him on? Or what do you all do from the interview forward?
So at that time, I'd stepped out. Chris was speaking with him. And once I think I pulled you out of the box. Is that correct?
Yes.
And I had explained to Chris what we had, which I was in complete shock that she was still alive.
So what we did was we came up with a plan. He's not giving us anything. So maybe because he expressed his care and love for his daughters, maybe we bring his daughters up and let him spend some time with his daughters. Observe what he's doing with his daughters, and come up with a plan on how we're going to approach the second half of this interview since she is alive, right? Because we can use that to our advantage. Because why? If he is the actual suspect, he thinks she's dead. So we're going to use that to our advantage when we go back in there. But also, by law, we have to change our interview technique, which means he was driven down to the police department by the police. He's in an interview room. He doesn't have a vehicle to leave, and we have closed the door already. So with those parameters, we have to advise him of his Miranda rights. So we prepare for that type of interview when we go back in there. And so we let his daughters spend time with him, hoping that maybe they'll talk about something, and we can observe their behavior at that time.
Yeah, to add on what Chris said, so that was our decision, was to take a break, let him visit with his daughters. Because of the situation, we were going to monitor that communication. So we allowed him in the same room with his two daughters. One of his daughters, who seemed to be closer to him than his other daughter, took place near him.
As we were observing the girls in the interview room, we discovered that maybe we need to think about how the family dynamics are and try to find out, well, maybe he has a history, and was he married before, and was there ever any previous domestic violence reports made on Don? So we have, like I said early on, simultaneously things are going on. Dave's done with a search warrant, so of course we use Dave again to do other research for us.
So, but as I'm listening to us talking, because we know this case so well, like we haven't even addressed that the two daughters weren't from the same mother.
With Don.
I mean, you got to get into it.
Umi was a pretty solid, intelligent woman, and Don Southworth enjoyed her company. But after a certain period of time, Donald met somebody else and became interested in somebody else and introduced that woman into their relationship eventually and explained to Umi, I've met this person and This is what she is to me. After some time, the other lady had the younger sibling, gave birth to the younger sibling. And in the meantime, they were married overseas, so he still called her, the second woman called her his wife. And at that time, they were separated. She had left Don, and that's why he was picking up his daughters in Cincinnati at the time, his one daughter in Cincinnati, and bringing her back.
But at one time, they all lived together.
He had visitation rights, correct. Early on in this investigation, we discovered that they had all been living together, the two daughters, Umi, and this other woman. And they lived in the same apartment, shared certain rooms with each other, and Donald was the A-type personality, and this is the way he was going to control or run his family.
I think it should be noted that Umi and the other lady, I don't think either one of them were agreeing to this either. Like, it wasn't like they thought this was good. It was just that's the way Don wanted it, and that's the way it was.
Yeah, this was Donald's doing. They just had to kind of live with it. But that information wasn't known to Chris and I in the interview until much later. So to go from that information, again, we didn't know that, to seeing his relationship with his two daughters in the box, and then us pulling him out and placing him in another box to talk to him, is where it starts to get a little weird, right? As far as his information.
Yes.
So what happens is we place him back in the box after we've seen this communication between him and the two daughters. We begin speaking to him again, and I tell him that we have located Umi.
Can I back up?
Mm-hmm.
During why I brought up his Miranda rights is when we went back in there, Bill said he was good about this. Bill said, we're going to have to ask you difficult questions. So to ask you these difficult questions, by law, we have to advise you of your rights. And Bill started the second sentence that Bill read on the Miranda rights. He said, but I didn't.
Talking to some officers out there at the scene, okay? They briefed me on a couple of things. So I wanted to ask you a couple of questions in reference to what they've been able to locate and find out there as far as talking to neighbors and stuff like that. Just basically to gain some more information to maybe help in this. So because I might have to ask you some hard questions probably from what we've talked to about the neighbors and talked to some surrounding people, it's just like you said you watch cops or you watch police shows. I'm not really watching, but anytime we have something for we're going to start asking some hard questions, we usually just advise them of the rights. That way everyone's covered. Okay? So I'm going to just read this card to you just to make sure you understand everything. It just says, we're police officers, and I warn you that anything you say will be used in a court of law against you. You have the absolute right to remain silent.
Oh, I'm under arrest?
No, I'm just advising you to make sure you're aware of your rights. Okay? Because you're up here, Don.
I didn't.
What? You know what?
I didn't.
What? You know what?
As he was reading, Bill said, what? He stopped because Bill was very observant and heard that. And he said, I don't know. And he just, I don't know why you're reading me. Am I in trouble? What's going on? So Bill picked up on it, and I thought for sure that we were going to be successful at that point, but unfortunately we were not.
Yeah, that went on for about a minute. I mean, it sounds like it went very quickly, but time had stopped. We were in the box. We're with this individual. I'm advising him of his rights. And as Chris said, as I'm going through it, he says, I didn't. And obviously we both caught that. And so we pressed him about it. He obviously realized he almost screwed up. So we backed off of it after we obviously weren't getting anywhere, because we still wanted him to talk to us, because at this point, Miranda's been advised. He knows his rights. So he could obviously say, I invoke my right and I'm not going to speak to you, right? So we didn't want to lose that. So after advising him, it was probably within the first few minutes, I said, well, while we've been on break and while you've been having time with your daughters, we have actually found Umi. And his expression was kind of like, oh my God, I can't believe you found her. And then when I told him that she's alive, he even took a second look at us like, well, she shouldn't be, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's the expression. But at the same time, he's saying, is she all right?
Yeah.
Is she okay? Is she all right? So he's smart. He's playing it well.
Yeah. So as I'm telling him the information and Chris and I are talking to him, then he starts to continue with, was she okay? Where's she at? So we explained to him that she had been transported to a medical facility here in Lexington, that she was being treated, and we were obviously going to go talk to her, and she was going to hopefully provide a statement to us eventually and tell us what had happened, and we would be able to tell him the same. He seemed a little concerned about that. And is that when we started talking about DNA?
Well, at first we asked him, who do you think would want to harm Umi like this? And this became important later on because he said, and like I said earlier, at the scene, we discovered it's a fourplex. Their apartments, if you're facing their apartment, it's a brick porch. And on the right side, downstairs is where the Southworths lived. Upstairs was another male individual. Across the hall was a Asian couple. And then above that couple was a single woman that she lived there and was a librarian. I don't know what her occupation was, but of course we interviewed her.
She worked for a bookstore.
And at that point when he said, he said, well, across the hall, they were our friends. We talked to them every once in a while. We didn't have any problems. The guy upstairs, he's gay, so he wouldn't harm her. And I'm thinking, why do you say that? But we're going to come back to that because later on it kind of is an issue that we bring up, that you understand as a detective that, oh, okay, if you put the crime scene together and you put what he just said, he's starting to help us out here, right? So
let me back just in case I missed it too. When you said that she had been found, how much detail did you go into about the condition she was found in or anything? So all this is just contemporaneously flying out of his mouth, right?
Just that she's alive and gone to the hospital, and they located her.
Yeah, he's a talker. He will, and that's the kind of people you like, right? When you're interviewing them, you like them to talk. So we just let him go with it.
So I imagine at this point, he is probably sick to his stomach thinking, since he doesn't know her condition, she may tell the truth about what happened. And he's probably trying to act like also he's relieved, so relieved that you all found my wife. I'm so relieved. Is that about how it went down?
That is his reaction, but at the same time, he's trying to cover his tracks. Obviously, we believe that he's the guy that we want for this, but he's also making us really work hard to figure that out. And there's a lot of things that happened throughout the investigation that he created these hurdles for us, and we had to get over them. And the audience will be shocked by some of the things that we still had to the hurdles we had to get over. So what I remember from that interview too is like Schoon or Chris had mentioned, I apologize. I'm going to go ahead and say this. I call Chris Schoonover Schoon because that's just what I do.
It's out of love.
Yeah. So I'm just going to stop trying to correct myself. It's Schoon. So,
and I accept it as his father.
There is quite an age difference. But what I would say is though, and this is what goes on in the office. So just a sidebar. This is how we are. We work. A lot of people think, how in the world do these guys solve homicides? But this is how it works. And Dave could even elaborate on that. I mean, you have to have that cutting up, the release, the great friendship to solve these cases because of the things you're seeing. Is that correct?
Oh yeah. If you don't act crazy, you'll go crazy. Mm-hmm. That's what I've always said. And maybe we'll do it. I said before, we probably ought to come back and do a show and talk about that dark gallows humor that's part of that and how that's a resiliency tool. Mm-hmm. But that was the best part. I'm with Dave. That was the best part of my career too. So
right.
Yeah, I think we all could agree that homicide's where it's at. It's the best position to have in the unit. And or in the department, if you're able to work that position, then you've done a lot. And more than likely for the victims' families, because that's what we're there for. So back to the interview. So what I remember too is he had said those things, but we really didn't catch that because he was such a talker. And so Chris picked up on it a little bit. And as the lead, just to kind of set the stage, when you're sitting there, I'm trying to hear what he's saying, ask the question, but I'm also thinking about the second and third question I'm going to ask. But that's why it's important to have a very good second, because that individual or that detective is listening to his response and also trying to think what I'm going to ask next. But he's listening a little bit better. So Chris picked up on it, which was great, but we also found it more when we started looking at the statement that he had made. As we continued with the interview, we began pressing him a little bit more. We wanted to push him and see what his response would be. And I remember as we started to push him, if you would see the video from the interview, he really starts closing himself up. His legs are crossed. He crosses his arms. He's becoming a little bit irate with us because I keep pushing him a little bit about his responses about where he's been, what he's doing, and who he's been with, and what she's doing.
And this is a perfect time where we knew he was telling the truth one time in that entire interview. And this is the time where Bill was trying to describe the crime scene with the backyard with the tire tracks. Oh. Well, yeah, Dave, and they were doing, of course, the neighborhood, and we talked about that in previous shows. Neighborhood canvas is very important to the detectives to get any information they can have. It's fresh with the neighbors. They know what's going on at the time, and they'll more likely talk when there's no one next door, in this case, and they'll tell you the truth. So those tire tracks, as he's talking to Donald and kind of giving him the tough questions, I get a text from the Forensic Services Unit and from Dave saying, hey, our survey, they're saying that there was a slip and slide out back, and that's where those tracks come from, is from that plastic that they laid down and watered, and everybody in the neighborhood was using the slip and slide and sliding towards the back of the woods there. So now I've got to go and explain to Bill that those aren't tire tracks, when at this point in the interview, Bill is confronting Donald about, did you drive Umi back there and then hide her body under those woods? Are you telling me you were on him pretty hard? And I'm going, let's get past those tire tracks, Bill. Let's just not talk about the tire tracks. I believe him. And at that point, Donald got very irate and raised his voice and said, I did not drive her back there. I don't care what you say. And it was probably the only time in that interview that we felt he was telling the truth. And I said, Bill, I believe him. He goes, okay, I'm past that. I believe you. And we move on to the tougher questions.
Yeah, as a detective in the homicide unit, and we all have a lot of experience in that area, you can almost feel when someone's telling you the truth based on their emotion, right? So that's the first time we'd actually seen him get upset. So I felt he was telling me the truth, but I was like, maybe he's trying to pull one over on me. But then when Schoon said, hey, you need to let this go, Schoon and I have worked together so long, I knew that there was something had happened. He found out something, and I need to move past it. And so I picked up on it and said, look, I'm past it. In fact, I think that's what I said. I'm past it, and let's move on. So, but we had almost gotten tired of listening to him. It was like one lie after another, or we felt like, and he really didn't show any compassion towards his wife.
Well, let's talk about that. In the interview, and we noticed this coming out of there, we spoke about this after he had left the police department. How many times did he ask what happened to his wife? Now, we told him that we had found her, and he said, I hope she's okay. Is she okay? And we just explained, well, she's being attended to by the emergency room physicians. And he never asked, did he, about, well, what's her injuries or what happened to her?
No, he never asked what happened to her, the condition we found her in, nor did he ever ask to really go see her. In fact, and that's one thing I was going to add to that, was before we ended the interview, because there's a time as a detective in homicide that you just know that you're probably pushing it too much. And he's not asked for an attorney yet. We still probably want to be able to talk to him at some point. So it's a fine line. It's like, do I keep pushing, or do I back off a little bit to give me that other opening at some point to talk to him when I have more information?
And the other thing we're looking at is, as detectives, and we spoke about this previously, is we want a conviction. So what's a defense attorney going to attack when this goes to trial? How long had he already been in the interview room?
Oh, several hours.
I was going to say, we kind of glossing over how long this is going on, but this is like, we're in hour 4 of getting the call, and now we are just now starting to be like, all right, let's take a break. And
that's correct. So, and that was one thing that was wearing on Schoon and I, was like, do we back out of this? Because Schoon and I are confident in our interview skills, and so is Dave. So, and I know all three of us do a great job. And so it was just a decision made by us to back out. Let's back out and let's see what we got, because this is way more, there's a lot more going on than we know. And we felt that. So once prior to backing out, we asked him what he wanted to do. I'll just leave it at that. And he basically said, I want to go. I'm tired. I want to go sleep. Well, where do you want to go? I want to go to a hotel that's close to his residence. If we can get you a ride there, that would be great. So that was kind of where we left it, was we'll get you a ride to the hotel.
Because we weren't going to let him have his van because we were going to keep that.
Was staying at the house not a choice?
No, because we still had it being processed. So a lot of times what the listeners need to realize is sometimes when you're processing a scene, that could take a number of hours, especially in a case like this. Or days, yeah. So that's why he could not go back there. But again, he never asked to really go see her. He was more concerned about being tired and wanting to go to a hotel.
As a detective, did that throw up red flags to you all that he didn't say, take me to my wife, I want to see that she's okay. I'm worried.
Well, that's exactly what Bill and I talked about. Let's get that on recording, right? So that's why we asked him that in the interview room. It's great evidence if it goes to trial. It's wonderful, right? We can use it later. Because you always think everybody thinks, well, there's evidence there, but there's also things that you can use against them that are missing, such as the missing statement of, I want to see my wife, take me to my wife, right?
Right.
You have to depend on the Commonwealth attorney or whatever attorney we're using to bring that out in the trial. And we assist them, and it's a long process. It's a team effort. Like I said in previous podcasts, it's a team effort that one detective, one attorney, one forensic science person does not do it all. It's a team effort to get a successful prosecution.
And what I'd like to add to that is, because of the day and age we're in now, unfortunately, is just because I'm the police doesn't mean I'm telling the truth. And so I usually have to show some type of evidence to say, this is really what they said. So like Chris Schoon said, is we put them in the box, whether they're going to talk to us or not, just to get them on video or audio, so then we know we can provide that to the jury. Because, in fact, in one case that I had, an individual didn't ask for an attorney. He just said, I don't really want to talk about this. He didn't say anything else. So I said, well, I'm going to take you to the office and just explain to you what's going on. So I put him in the box, and he invoked his right. But what I had done is explain to him what had gone on and why he was under arrest, and explained his charges. And of those charges was murder, rape, burglary, and tampering. And of those four, he said, well, how are you charging me with burglary? Which is huge for a jury to see once I end up placing those charges and we go to trial, because he's not concerned about the other charges. He was asking why about the burglary.
I was going to comment earlier, and I'm going to do it now. It was funny when you were talking about how he got so upset over the tire tracks and driving the truck. That small, tiny thing, and he goes off the hook. And then you're talking about that guy, and that's another thing I experienced over the years. The ridiculously minuscule things that they would lose their minds over compared to the fact that you're talking to him about killing somebody. That's just, I think the listeners need to learn, because people are always like, what makes them tick and what's like to interview them. They get hung up on those stupid integrity issues over the dumbest things. That's just a great point.
Well, he knew that wasn't true, and they were pushing on that. Those are tire tracks, and he knows that's not true.
Yeah, it's a great indicator, like Chris was saying. Sometimes it's what you're not hearing that is more powerful.
So are you thinking at this point, if you let him go to that hotel, is it going to be tough to get him back and get him talking again?
Well,
no, he likes to talk.
Yeah. So we give him, and let me back up, in the interview, we gave him a DNA scenario. And at the time, when I was a little younger, DNA was the go-to, right? And it may still be, but computer and technology is the go-to, I believe, with the younger detectives. Yeah, which is what Dave's an expert at. But we were trying to explain DNA to him. And during that interview, I said, what's going to happen if, you said you looked in the woods for her along the wood line, you didn't find her, and now you say you didn't find her, didn't see her, and we test where she was found. Is there any item back there that's going to have your DNA? And he went into, well, when I was looking for her, I noticed a box spring, a mattress that I sat down on.
Well, he actually says that later on in a phone interview where he's not in custody.
Oh, that's right, because that's right.
So, but you're correct on the DNA. You asked him about DNA, and he became very...
He changed his demeanor because he was trying to think before he talked.
Yeah, because he was like, Well, shit. I mean, so what happens if that demeanor? What happens if there is DNA there?
Right.
So, but yeah, you pressed him about the DNA.
I even had him explain what DNA was, and he caught on quick, and he could explain it. He was very articulate. So he said, "No, shouldn't." And I said, "Well, you need to think about it before you go. If there's anything else you want to tell us, if you were back there into the wood line where she was found, anything." He said, "No, guys, I'm just tired. I can't help you out any further." And that was exactly right. I can't help you out. I'm tired.
That's correct. And the importance the listeners need to understand is the baseline is so important, because what you get from them in the very beginning, you can always use against them later on. And that's things that we end up reviewing. And Chris did a really good job in this case in reviewing documents or the actual transcriptions of the interviews. And he found all these discrepancies that we were able to press him on later on.
Right. And what I remember from Dave, working with him and being his understudy, I guess you could say, is Dave would say, a good lie is better than nothing at all. If they claim up on you, have nothing, but a good lie is a great thing to have, because you can disprove that in a heartbeat.
So I think at this point would probably be a good move so to answer your question, we end up letting him go, and we ended up taking him to the hotel, which was just down from where he lived. But what our plan was at that point was we felt that maybe he may try to go somewhere.
Well, no, that was
the next night.
Next night, okay.
See, what listeners need to realize, it's not like on TV, and I'm looking at Dave smiling right now, because we got called out at 7 p.m. on June 9th, 2010. It is now 2 o'clock in the morning. We're driving Donald Southworth to a hotel. And the listeners are probably saying, well, what about the two children? Where are they? What's happened to them?
We fed them.
Bought them
ice cream.
Yes. We agreed with family services to let them go to the other wife's home, because we wanted to keep the sisters together. And the two sisters agreed to go. The older sister was not happy about it, but at least it was with somebody she knew.
So you mentioned earlier that the two daughters were there. I wanted to know, what are they doing during this time that you're interviewing Donald? And also I wanted to ask, what are the ages of these girls?
So the ages of the two girls were 12 and 9 so as we were talking about earlier, after we allowed him to spend time with them and we moved him into another room to do the second part of the interview, they just remained in the other room until we contacted the other parent to come and pick them up. But they'd also been fed, received ice cream. They knew their mother was missing. Dawn had explained that to him in the room. There was some concern about where she may be. But again, it was mostly a silent room, just as they were sitting there, and they were consoling each other.
Yeah. The younger child asked, what happened? What's going on? And Donald said, the oldest daughter said, I don't want to talk about it. Do I have that right? One of them said, I don't want to talk about it. The other one started talking about it.
No, that's correct. So if you can imagine or envision the room that they're sitting in, which is another interview room next to ours, they're basically, I'll set the stage, is you have Donald sitting on the floor. You have one of the daughters sitting in the chair closest to him, and then you have the younger daughter sitting the furthest away from the two of them in the corner. And that's when the oldest daughter says, I don't want to talk about it. If I recall correctly, this is when Donald says, I understand, we're not talking about it. And there's some consoling going on at that point.
Right.
And at that point is when we decide there's nothing else to gain from this. Let's pull him out. Let's do the second interview, which is what we've already talked about, advising him of his rights. And at that point, we had the other detectives that were working the crimes against children victim, the family abuse section, contact the other parent to come and get them.
So you release everybody. The girls go with the other parent. Donald goes to his hotel. What do you all do for the remainder of the night? Or do you call it a day and start again tomorrow?
Well, in homicide, it's hard to ever call it a day because we typically work nonstop. And again, I keep referring to the first 48, but a lot of people watch that show In fact, even a lot of the suspects we interview in the box say, "Oh, this is just like the first 48. I'm sitting in the room that they are interviewed in." So a lot of people kind of compare the first 48 to what we're doing, and honestly, it's probably the closest rendition of what we do. Other than if anyone has seen The Wire from HBO, it's a great show that probably depicts what we actually do. They go home, or they go with the other parent. Donald goes to the hotel, and our day's not done. They're still processing the scene, and that's when we decide to go to the scene. So as the lead and the secondary and any other detective that's involved, you typically go there to see what forensics has discovered and also to do a walkthrough.
Because they've been interviewing for 3-4 hours, and so now you can really see what the inside of the apartment looks like, because they haven't seen that because we had to wait on the warrant. They're more concerned on the interviews. And so now we can all walk through that together, and we can talk about things that forensics has found, things that kind of stand out, or things that are just kind of normal. And so that's kind of the next step.
So do you go to the apartment that night?
That is. So we all traveled to the apartment. I think Chris, Schoon, and I traveled there. I think, did you go with us, Dave?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we all go there. Dave's in his flip-flops. So we go to the scene. It's still being processed. So imagine, so we have the the crime scene vehicles. We have crime scene technicians, the forensic guys there, and we're processing the scene. So as it was set up earlier, it's a fourplex basically. They live in the bottom right apartment. So when you first walk in the door, there's kind of a common area. And then as you make your way through the apartment, if you turn right, there's a bedroom. If you turn 2 bedrooms, as you turn right, there's a bedroom to the left, a bedroom to the right. That front bedroom is going to be the parents' bedroom. The back bedroom is the children's bedroom. And then there's some music equipment in the kitchen area and also in the front room. And then as you make your way through the apartment, to the back of the apartment is the kitchen. And then there's actually a door that allows you into a common area that gives you access to the basement. So what we were doing was we were searching the residence for any evidence to show that maybe the scene was inside and she was carried outside, but we were also processing any evidence that we thought could be involved in what we were observing outside where she was, specifically like the belt, her clothing, and things of that nature.
Yeah, so the other thing we're looking for, so when you go to trial, a defense attorney will say, you, from day one, honed in on my client. You didn't look at anybody else. Did you? And then, of course, on the stand, you want to show that you did a well-rounded investigation. So the first thing, and it's kind of as listeners, you're probably saying, hey, well, could you check the doors? Was there forced entry? Was there any kind of locks that were already locked, or did somebody have a key and come in the back door? And now I want to remind you, Donald gave us the boyfriend, right? So did Umi give her boyfriend a key for after Donald went to work at 3:17 a.m. in the morning so the boyfriend could come back? We have to think of those things. So you want to look at door casings. You want to look at windows, make sure there were no windows broken. Or a positive thing is if you walked around all the windows and they're all locked, that eliminates a lot of things. So we're checking locks. We're looking at door casings. We're looking into the trash cans. We're looking into, where are your coats? Do you leave your car keys somewhere, right? Because we know her car was in the carport that morning.
I'd like to talk about the trash can. I thought that was really interesting in that crime scene because in the room there was some computer electronics and everything. And obviously after talking to Don, I was like, we need to take all of these videos and computers. So we need to look at all of that stuff. But in the trash can in that room, there was only one piece of paper. That was it. No trash, no Kleenex, anything. And it was just a divorce decree. No creases in the paper, no wadded up, just like printed out and stuck in the trash. And so forensics is taking pictures of this and they're showing to us. And you're like, why is that like front and center for you to see about this divorce decree?
Because somebody wanted you to see it.
Exactly.
Right. So then as you work your way from the inside of the house, and during his interview, he mentioned something a lot about a water hose. So let me cut to the chase on the water hose. He said, I don't know, but I moved the water hose back to the house. Bill and I, to this day, don't know really what the hot water hose was used for. There's something that was important to him, but we have never figured it out. But he said it probably 3 to 4 times. then we work our way back to the wooded area. So what we have at the wooded area is the mattress, the box spring, right? And now when we get there, it's in a different position, of course, because it's been processed and people have moved things and they attended to Umi. The box spring, the clothes are still out there. And what we find are on the other side of a chain link fence.
I was going to say, talk more about the clothes.
Yeah. On the other side of the chain link fence, we find a long sweater, like a house coat, a nightgown, and they're wadded and thrown up on the other side of the fence. So hopefully we're thinking, okay, she was found nude. Her clothes are wadded up and thrown over the fence. We still haven't found her purse, which if you know any woman, they're not going anywhere without their purse, right? We still haven't found that. But we're concentrating on that. We're looking into the kitchen. We're trying to find everything in the kitchen is important, right? Because we don't know what happened with Umi. So they're videotaping the kitchen. Paper towels, kettles, spatulas. Bill's going through the drawers to look at the drawers.
Looking in the freezer, looking in the fridge.
Yes, we find nothing out of the ordinary. We see that she cooks, which kind of supports that he said she fixed me lunch before I went to work. Do you recall seeing a cat there, Bill?
Yes.
Okay. Because
it was a big cat. And I don't like cats. There was also a snake there, and I don't like snakes.
Yeah, we'll get to the snake. The snake he used for the kids in the neighborhood. He liked to spend time with the kids and show them about the snake. And his daughters liked the snake, too. I'm afraid of snakes. But anyway, part of his story in his interview was that the cat ran out the back door, maybe. And maybe she went out to find out what happened to the cat, and maybe somebody attacked her back there. So that was one theory he had. He also talked about all her texting, and you need to find her phone because she was texting all the time, all night long. It even irritated her oldest daughter. Her oldest daughter would ask her, "Who are you texting all the time?" That was concerning to him. So we still didn't have the cell phone. So we were missing some things. And at the scene, early on, that's what we saw at the scene.
And the flip-flop.
Mm-hmm. So there's a lot going on here, and that's why we're all kind of jumping in, is because there's so many things going on at the same time. So what Dave was mentioning was a flip-flop and keys. Early on, when I had mentioned the Fazoli girls, when they had arrived on scene prior to the police being called to the scene, was when they had gotten there, they were wanting to talk to the one daughter and ask if they had seen, or if she had seen her mother. She had stated no, she thought she was at work, but it was odd that her car was there. One of the Fazoli ladies made her way around the back of the house and discovered a flip-flop and a set of keys, both which belonged to Umi. So she obviously thought that was weird, but at the same time as the discovery took place, Donald was there and approached her in a almost threatening way. You need to leave. This is not your problem. So she left, and they actually did a little surveillance on Donald, watching to see if he would leave after they left, and he did, and they followed him around the block, and that's what created them to call the police. They thought he was obviously suspicious and thought that he had some involvement in her being missing. So as we're still processing the scene, so it's dark, we're still trying to process the scene with lighting, but we're also inside the house, and as we make our way through the house, like Schoon had said, we're photographing, videoing, and things of that nature. But the problem with you being on a scene is you don't know what the scene looked like before. So, is a house look like this all the time, or is there something wrong? Or so you're having to really look around and search and things of that nature. So we finally make our way to the basement, which was the common area for all four of the apartments. And in the basement, they had some storage areas, but that was their area for where they all had their own washing machine and dryer. So we were able to discover which one, or identify which washing machine and dryer belonged to the Southworths. And when we did, we came across opening the washing machine to find several items that we thought to be suspicious. And what I mean by that is these items specifically were found in their washing machine, which was a pair of leather New Balance shoes, a UPS hat, which remind you the Donald was working for UPS at the time, women's underwear, a white sock, men's underwear, a pillowcase, checkered shirt, white boxer shorts, blue pajama pants, towel, and a pair of UPS pants. So these apparently were items that we felt that could be involved in the homicide. So as we pulled those items, we documented those items, and then we also swabbed the washing machine for any type of blood, and that came up negative. So typically people do not wash their shoes, right?
Unless you're 12 years old and a boy, right?
And specifically don't wash their hat. And anybody who wears a hat, you don't wash your hat because of what it does to it. So we all felt that this was definitely an indication that we probably are looking at the right person, which is going to be Donald. But again, knowing it and proving it is two different things. We all know that.
Right. So after we did our walkthrough, we end up not going home. We go back to the police headquarters, and what detectives, and Dave, we did this with you a lot. So I kind of passed it down to these other guys. We do a round table. We do a think tank, right? What did we miss? What's next? What if we think it might not be Donald? What do we got to look at? Who do we have to approach? If it is Donald, what else do we have to do? We still have her purse missing. We have her cell phone missing. We know where her car keys are, and we're still missing a flip-flop. Well, and all the credit goes to Dave Richardson, is he comes up with, well, we have K9 as a resource. Why don't we do an article search, right? That's a great idea. So the next day when it begins to become light out,
we haven't gone to bed.
We have not. We decide that an article search would be great. Now, so we arranged to have that done. And lo and behold, if you recall earlier, I said there's high weeds almost up to the roof of that carport in the back. And so we let the K9 go through there, and we discovered, I'll let you describe what was found since it was your wonderful idea.
Well, thank you, Chris.
Hey, there's more to the story, so go download the next episode like the true crime fan that you are.
The Murder Police podcast is hosted by Wendy and David Lyons and was created to honor the lives of crime victims so their names are never forgotten. It is produced, recorded, and edited by David Lyons. The Murder Police podcast can be found on your favorite Apple or Android podcast platform, as well as at murderpolicepodcast.com, which is our website, and it has show notes for imagery and audio and video files related to the cases you're going to hear. We are also on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Pinterest, LinkedIn, and YouTube, which has closed caption available for those that are hearing impaired. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe for more and give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcast or wherever you download your podcast from. Subscribe to the Murder Police Podcast and set your player to automatically download new episodes so you get the new ones as soon as they drop. And please tell your friends. Lock it down, Judy.